Burt Reynolds and Jerry Reed were giants of their time, one reshaping Hollywood with effortless charisma, the other redefining American music with instinct and grit. On screen, their friendship looked simple, even joyful, built on laughter and shared roots. But away from the spotlight, their connection followed a far more complicated path. And before Burt Reynolds passed away, he finally revealed what he had kept buried for years about Jerry Reed. And no one was prepared for it. For decades, audiences assumed they understood the bond between Reynolds and Reed. On screen, they seemed inseparable, two men perfectly in sync, trading humor, loyalty, and mischief as if it came naturally. Their chemistry was electric, yes, but it wasn't just an act. Reynolds saw something in Reed that went far beyond the laughs, something the public would never fully grasp until years later. Their partnership began quietly, almost by accident, in the mid-1970s. Reed first appeared alongside Reynolds in films like WW and the Dixie Dance Kings and later Gator. These were not blockbuster hits, but they allowed Reynolds to observe Reed closely. Unlike most actors, Reed hadn't trained formally. He didn't rely on technique or rehearsal polish. What he had instead was instinct timing and an ease in front of the camera that few could teach. Reynolds noticed. By that point, Reynolds was already a Hollywood heavyweight. After Deliverance, he had become a box office force almost overnight. His blend of toughness, charm, and humor made him irresistible on screen, and films like The Longest Yard cemented his appeal. By the mid-1970s, Reynolds wasn't just starring in movies. He was shaping them. That influence proved pivotal during the development of Smokey and the Bandit. Reynolds wasn't merely the star of the film. He had a hand in steering its creative direction. When it came time to cast Cletus Snowman Snow, the truck-driving counterpart who would balance the Bandit's swagger, studios suggested other names. Jerry Reed wasn't even on their radar. To them, he was a musician first, a novelty casting choice with limited acting experience. But Reynolds disagreed. He insisted Reed was the only one who could bring the character to life. Reed embodied Southern culture, rhythm, humor, and instinct, the authenticity that the film demanded. Reynolds trusted him completely. At the time, Reed didn't need Hollywood validation. He was already a Grammy-winning musician, respected for his songwriting and guitar prowess. Hits like Guitar Man and Amos Moses had established him as a distinctive voice in American music long before he wore a cowboy hat on screen. But he hadn't yet had a defining film role. That changed with Smokey and the Bandit. Reed didn't just play Snowman. He defined the film's rhythm. He wrote and performed Eastbound and Down, a song that became inseparable from the movie itself. Its opening notes evoke CB radios, truck stops, and endless highways. It wasn't just a soundtrack. It became the heartbeat of the film. On screen, Reynolds and Reed were perfect foils. Reynolds exuded smooth, charismatic outlaw energy, while Reed grounded the film with plain-spoken humor and impeccable comedic timing. They reunited for Hooper, returned for Smokey and the Bandit 2, and later appeared together in the ensemble chaos of the Cannonball Run. When Reynolds declined to return for Smokey and the Bandit Part 3, Reed stepped into the lead role himself. Proof of how integral he had become to the franchise. Off-screen, their friendship was as real as it appeared. They shared humor, Southern roots, and a mutual understanding of timing and rhythm. Reynolds admired Reed's ability to move seamlessly between music and acting without sacrificing credibility in either arena. But even during their most celebrated years, Reynolds noticed things about Reed that the public never saw. Struggles, pressures, and habits that remained private but weighed heavily on his friend. Reynolds himself was no stranger to hidden struggles. Behind his charm and confidence lay chronic pain, injuries, and personal challenges. From his early stunt work to a serious jaw injury on City Heat, Reynolds' body bore the cost of decades of pushing limits. Prescription medication became part of his life, and emotional isolation shadowed the fame he projected effortlessly. Financial troubles, divorce, and romantic heartbreak compounded the difficulties, leaving him reflective, often privately acknowledging regrets that the public could never perceive. Jerry Reed, meanwhile, had endured his own lifetime of hardship before fame. Born into a poor cotton farming family in rural Georgia, Reed experienced instability from a young age. Time in foster care, financial uncertainty, and constant upheaval forced him to grow up quickly. Music became his refuge. By his teenage years, he was performing in bars and clubs, developing a natural musicality that formal education could never teach. Reed's early career was grind. Record contracts faltered, opportunities were scarce, and the music industry demanded conformity. Yet persistence paid off when Elvis Presley recorded Reed's Guitar Man, propelling him into wider recognition. With Grammy wins and chart success, Reed cemented his place in music history. But his personal habits, including a lifelong dependency on cigarettes, quietly shaped his health over the years. Reed's transition to film brought visibility, but also limitations. Hollywood loved his southern charm and comedic timing, but often typecast him in a narrow range of roles. Even as his music career flourished, his screen identity remained largely fixed. The quick-witted, down-to-earth sidekick. While audiences adored him, Reed quietly navigated constraints in an industry that rarely let him expand beyond expectation. Financially, Reed faced challenges common to many musicians of his era. Uneven royalties and inconsistent income required continuous work, even when his body ached and stamina waned. By the 1990s, collaborations like the Old Dogs allowed him to reconnect with audiences and peers while honoring his creative roots. He remained active in the studio as long as he could, even as physical limitations increasingly curtailed performance. Reed passed away on September 1st, 2008, in Nashville, Tennessee, due to complications from emphysema, a quiet end to a life defined by endurance and talent. After Reed's passing, Reynolds spoke with a rare candor. He described Reed as more than a co-star, a brother, a collaborator, a man whose instincts shaped films and lives alike. Reynolds emphasized that Smokey and the Bandit owed much of its energy and rhythm to Reed. Eastbound and Down, he said, wasn't just a song, it was the film's pulse. Reed's presence allowed scenes to breathe, humor to land, and characters to feel genuine. Reynolds recalled the casting story with pride and amusement. When Reed initially hesitated to commit due to scheduling conflicts, Reynolds reportedly said, "Well, I'll just drive to your house, throw you in a car, and take you to the set myself." That level of insistence reflected a rare understanding and trust between them. And when Reed took over the bandit role in the third film, Reynolds admired his friend's good-natured approach, knowing it wasn't about replacing him. It was about carrying forward something they had built together. Reed, in turn, acknowledged Reynolds' influence on his career. In interviews, he framed Reynolds as a loyal friend who opened doors that Hollywood might otherwise have left closed. Nature approach, knowing it wasn't about replacing him. It was about carrying forward something they had built together. Reed, in turn, acknowledged Reynolds' influence on his career. In interviews, he framed Reynolds as a loyal friend who opened doors that Hollywood might otherwise have left closed.